The person you love is showing you who you are. Carl Jung. Carl Jung observed that the face which pulls you across a crowded room is rarely a stranger's face at all. It is a face your own psyche has been carrying, unlit for years, waiting for the world to hand it a body. As Jung wrote in Collected Works Volume 10, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." And he meant this quite literally, that inside the one you call yourself there lives a second figure, an inner other, who has never spoken a word out loud, but who chooses, with startling precision, exactly whom you cannot stop thinking about. This is not poetry. Jung built an entire structure of the psyche on it, and once you see the structure, you cannot unsee it in your own love story. And if these teachings find something true in you, I would gently invite you to subscribe, so that tomorrow's teaching has a way of finding you too. The first key is that the beloved is always partly a screen. Jung called the inner figure the Anima in a man and the Animus in a woman, together forming what he named a psyche, a paired image of the contrasexual soul. This figure is not learned from your mother or your father alone. It is older than your biography. It is a structural piece of the unconscious itself. And when you meet someone who seems to fit it, something in you does not merely notice them, something in you recognizes them. Jung put it plainly, that the anima or animus is unconsciously projected upon the person of the beloved. That is the exact language, projected, which means part of what you are loving in the early weeks is not yet the actual human being across the table. It is your own soul image wearing their coat. Imagine a woman on a first date, sitting across from a man she has known for exactly 40 minutes, and already something in her chest insists she has always known him. His laugh lands like a memory. His hands on the table feel oddly familiar. She will go home and tell her sister. It felt like fate. But notice what actually happened in that room. She did not yet know his habits, his temper, his fears at 3 in the morning. She knew almost nothing of the man. What she felt so certainly was her own inner figure, stepping forward to meet its reflection, arriving faster than any real knowledge of him ever could. This is worth saying again in plainer words. It is not that the connection is false, it is that it is early, too early to be about him at all. And mistaking that first recognition for final knowledge is how so much heartbreak later gets its start. Because you cannot be disappointed by a stranger. You can only be disappointed by an image you built and then handed to a stranger to wear. This is not a flaw in you. It is how the human heart has always worked. But it means the opening rush of love is, at least in part, a meeting with yourself, dressed as someone else. So here is a decree. To carry from this first key, I will learn to see the image I am projecting. Before I mistake it for the person, say it once, and once again quietly. I will learn to see the image I am projecting, before I mistake it for the person. The second key is that this inner figure is not random. It is looking for a very specific fit. Think of the anima, or animus, as a lock, built over decades, out of your childhood impressions, your culture's images, your first unspoken longings, and what it is searching for is not perfection. It is resonance, a tilt of the head, a certain low laugh, a particular quality of attention that once, long ago, meant safety, or excitement, or being truly seen. This is why you can walk past 100 kind, attractive, entirely reasonable people and feel nothing, and then feel struck still by someone who is none of those adjectives in any obvious way. Imagine a man standing at a friend's birthday gathering, glass in hand, half listening to a conversation about nothing in particular, when a woman across the room laughs at something someone else said, and the sound of it stops him mid-sentence. He could not tell you why. She is not the most striking person there. She is not dressed to be noticed. She has said perhaps 4 words all evening, and yet something in him has already decided, before a single real conversation has happened, that she matters. Later he will tell his friends it was her laugh, or her eyes. But underneath that simple explanation is something far older. His own inner feminine figure, his animus's counterpart, has been quietly rehearsing this exact shape of aliveness his whole life. Some particular blend of warmth and mischief he first felt, perhaps, in an aunt who paid him real attention as a boy, or in a teacher whose approval once meant the whole world, and that old shape has been waiting, patiently, for a woman to wear it again. This is what Jung meant when he wrote that the anima is the archetype of life itself, not decoration, not fantasy, but a living current that organizes desire from underneath. Without asking permission, it does not consult you, it does not explain itself. It simply lights up in the presence of a certain resonance and leaves you standing there, calling the result love at first sight, when what has actually happened is wreck. The third key is that this is precisely why the same story keeps happening to so many people. Not the same person, but the same story, told again in a different accent, with a different face, wearing different clothes. Imagine a woman who has now, across 3 relationships, fallen for men who are charming in public and strangely absent in private. Each time she is certain this one is different, he seems warmer, more present, more hers. He remembers small things, he says the right words early on, and each time, months in, the same absence resurfaces, as if summoned by an invitation she never consciously sent. She is not choosing badly by accident, and she is not simply unlucky in a world full of difficult men. Her inner animus figure carries an old, unmet expectation, perhaps of a father who was affectionate from a distance, but never close up, warm in memory, but never quite in the room. And that figure keeps recognizing, keeps lighting up around. The men who can replay that exact configuration of near and far. This is not fate. And it is not a soulmate returning in different bodies to finish some old business. It is an unconscious pattern finding fresh material, again and again, until it is finally seen for what it is. Picture a man, by contrast, who keeps falling for partners who criticize him sharply, and then draw him close again. He calls it passion, he calls it chemistry, but underneath, an old inner voice learned long ago that love arrives folded inside disapproval, so his own soul image goes looking for exactly that folding, and finds it, with uncanny reliability, in stranger after stranger. Jung would say the pattern itself is not the enemy, the unconsciousness of it is, because a pattern that stays in the dark simply repeats itself with new names attached to it. A new face standing where the old one stood, saying nearly the same things, while the person living it swears each time that this is finally different. But a pattern brought into the light of awareness starts to lose its grip. Not all at once, not dramatically, but the way a spell loses its hold once you can name it aloud. This is worth sitting with plainly. If you notice you keep loving a certain kind of unavailable, or a certain kind of controlling, or a certain kind of charming and hollow, the common denominator is not bad luck, and it is not that every eligible person happens to share the same flaw. The common denominator is the inner figure doing the choosing while you stand there feeling like it is love at first sight. And in a sense it is. It is love at first sight of your own unconscious material, wearing a stranger's face, recognized instantly, the way you recognize your own handwriting on a page you forgot you wrote. So here is the decree. I will not blame chance for a pattern my own psyche keeps writing. Say it once, and again slowly. I will not blame chance for a pattern my own psyche keeps writing. The fourth key is that this explains the glow, and it explains the fade. That first stretch of love, where the person seems lit from within, where their ordinary sentences feel profound, where their flaws look charming instead of irritating. That glow is largely the soul image shining through them, your own inner figure lending its light to their outline. And this is real. It is not nothing. Jung never dismissed it as mere illusion. He understood it as one of the most powerful experiences the psyche can produce. Because for a while, it feels as though you have finally found the missing half of yourself walking around in the world, wearing shoes, ordering coffee, laughing at your jokes. Imagine a man in the early months of a new relationship. He tells his friends that this woman is different. She understands him without explanation. Her voice on the phone settles something in his chest that nothing else has ever settled. He finds himself thinking of her during meetings, replaying small things she said as though they were oracles. This is not foolishness. This is the anima doing exactly what Jung said it does, lending its light freely and without asking. But a few months further in, the same man notices she forgets to call back. She is short with him after a long day. She has opinions about money that annoy him. She snores. She is, in short, a woman, a specific, limited, tired, ordinary woman, and something in him panics, because the luminous figure he fell for seems to be dimming, quarrel by quarrel, ordinary evening by ordinary evening. Here is where most people make the mistake that costs them the relationship. They assume the dimming means the love was false, that the early feeling was the real thing, and this later flatness is the lie. But Jung's understanding runs the other way entirely. The glow was never the whole truth. It was your own material, on loan, and the flatness that follows is not the death of the connection. It is the first appearance of the actual human being who has been standing behind the light the entire time. A real person, given enough shared hours, will always begin to show you the parts of themselves that do not match the image. They will be tired when you needed them warm, distracted when you needed them focused, plain, in ways your inner figure never was, and this moment, the one people call falling out of love, is far closer to something else. It is disillusionment in its most literal sense. The disillusioning, the slow removal of the illusion, so that something truer can be seen underneath. Before that moment, in real terms, you were partly in relationship with your own psyche, admiring your own inner figure's reflection in a willing mirror. After that moment, if you can bear the discomfort of it, you are finally in relationship with another actual person, which is a stranger and harder thing than admiring a projection, but also the only thing sturdy enough to build a life on. This is why the couples who last are rarely the ones who never lost the spark. They are the ones who lost it, felt the flatness, and stayed long enough to discover what was underneath the light. Jung's own life carried a quiet version of this pattern. Late in his years, describing decades of inner work, he used the words, "It is art," meaning that what had unfolded within him was never simply given whole. It had to be made, worked, tended by hand, across a long stretch of ordinary days. And the same is true of love. Once the projection begins to thin, it stops being a gift that fell on you from nowhere and starts being something you build, deliberately, with your eyes open, seeing the actual tired, imperfect, specific person in front of you, and choosing them anyway, not because they still glow, but because you have decided they are worth the work of real seeing. So when the glow fades, do not mistake it for an ending. Ask instead what has just become visible now, that the borrowed light has dimmed enough to let you see the shape underneath it. That shape, plain as it may look at first, is the only thing in the entire arrangement that was ever actually real. So here is the decree. I will let the fading of the glow be the start of real seeing. Say it once, and once more. I will let the fading of the glow be the start of real seeing. The fifth key turns the lens back on you specifically, not on the pattern out there, not on the difficult partners other people seem to choose, but on this week, on Tuesday, on the small, sharp moment you might have already forgotten. Think of the flash of disproportionate hurt when your partner forgot to text back for a few hours, or the outsized relief when they finally said the thing you needed to hear, or the quiet resentment that flares when they want an evening alone. Notice the size of the feeling against the size of the event. A few hours of silence is a small event, if the hurt it produces in you is enormous. That gap between the small cause and the large reaction is where your inner figure is speaking. It had an expectation, built from old material, and the actual living person in front of you simply failed to perform it on schedule. This is not to say your feelings are wrong. Feelings are never wrong, but they are often pointing somewhere other than where you first look. Ask yourself plainly, when did I first learn that being forgotten meant something dangerous? When did closeness first come paired with disappearing? The answer usually sits further back than the current relationship, and once you see it there, you stop needing your partner to fix an old wound simply by behaving perfectly in the present. Imagine a woman sitting at her kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Her husband is 15 minutes late coming home, nothing more dramatic than traffic, and yet she notices her chest tighten, her thoughts already rehearsing an argument, already building a case that he does not value her time. If you asked her in that moment what she was feeling, she would say anger. Plain and simple, anger at his carelessness. But if she paused, if she let the feeling sit, instead of firing it outward, she might notice something older underneath it. A childhood spent waiting by a window for a parent who came home late, more often than not, who came home unpredictable, who taught a small child that lateness meant something had gone wrong, that she had been forgotten. This is not something she chose to carry into her marriage. It arrived with her, quietly, and it attached itself to the first man who was ever late for anything. Her husband is not her father. He is a grown man stuck behind a delivery truck, but the 15 minutes he is late become, without either of them knowing it, a stage on which an old drama replays itself, and unless she catches this, she will spend years being furious at a man for a debt that belongs to someone else entirely. This is the pattern Jung kept pointing toward, that the sharper and more disproportionate a reaction is, the more certainly it is being fed from underneath by material that has nothing to do with the person standing in front of you. A small delay should produce a small feeling. When it produces a large one, the largeness itself is the clue. It is not evidence that your partner has done something unforgivable. It is evidence that an old wound has just been touched by a very ordinary hand. And this cuts both ways. The same is true of the moments when you feel an almost unbearable relief that someone finally noticed you, finally said the right words. That relief, too, is often larger than the moment warrants, and it is worth asking what old hunger just got fed, not to shrink the joy, but to understand where it is actually coming from. This is not to say your partner's behavior never matters. Sometimes lateness really does mean carelessness. Sometimes distance really does mean disinterest. The outer person is real, and their actions are real. But before you diagnose them, it is worth diagnosing the size of your own reaction first. Because a reaction that is out of proportion to the event is rarely, if ever, only about the event. This is the much more honest question Jung kept insisting on across his whole body of work. That the material stirred up in love is never really about the other person alone. It is about what the other person has stirred awake in you. And that question, asked quietly and without blame, does more for a relationship than any accusation ever could. So here is the decree for this key. I will ask what old wound is speaking. Before I ask what they did wrong, say it once, and again quietly. I will ask what old wound is speaking. Before I ask what they did wrong. The sixth key is the practice of taking the projection back, gently, without drama, and without abandoning the relationship to do it. This is not a call to stop loving anyone, and it is certainly not a call to end things at the first sign of disillusionment. It is a quieter discipline, and like most quiet disciplines, it looks like almost nothing from the outside. Imagine a woman sitting on the edge of her bed on a Sunday evening, her partner asleep down the hall, and she is turning over a small moment from earlier that day. He had come home late from an errand, 10 minutes late, no more. And for those 10 minutes, she had felt something close to panic rising in her chest. A feeling far too large for 10 minutes of lateness. She could have simply called it anxiety and let it pass. But instead, she asks the question underneath it, where did I expect him to be more than human tonight? And slowly, she remembers a much younger version of herself, waiting by a window for a parent who did not always come home when promised. The panic was never really about her partner's 10 minutes. It belonged to a much older waiting. This is the projection inventory in its plainest form, not a grand confession, not a dramatic breakthrough, just a woman on the edge of a bed, tracing a feeling back to where it actually lives. And doing this once does not change everything, but doing this again and again, week after week, slowly returns something to her that she did not know she had been giving away. Her own energy, on loan to another person's shoulders, spent expecting him to heal a wound he never caused and cannot see. Notice too that this practice has a shape you can actually hold in your hands. First you feel the surge, the disproportion, the anger too large for the errand, the joy too large for the small kindness. Second, you pause before you speak it out loud, not to suppress it, only to let it finish rising. Third, you ask the one honest question, whose feeling is this originally? And fourth, and only fourth, you decide what if anything needs to be said to the actual person standing in front of you. Most people skip straight from the first step to the fourth. They feel the surge and speak it immediately, as though the feeling itself were proof of what the other person did wrong. But a feeling is only a messenger, and a messenger carrying a very old letter is not always describing tonight. Consider a man who notices, one ordinary Wednesday, that his wife's silence after a hard day at work makes him feel almost unbearably shut out. He could tell her she is cold. He could withdraw and sulk for the evening, or he could sit with the shut-out feeling for one quiet minute before either. And in that minute he might notice it is the exact shade of a much older loneliness. A house where a parent's silence once meant something was badly wrong and had to be fixed by a child who did not yet have the tools to fix it. His wife's silence tonight is only tiredness, nothing more. But the size of what he feels tells him where the real work is waiting. This is not an excuse for her to be careless with him forever, and it is not a reason for him to swallow every legitimate complaint. It is simply the discipline of sorting, before you speak, what is his and what is old. Jung's own understanding of this deepened across his life. He did not treat the Anima and Animus as problems to be solved once and then closed. He treated them as living inner companions that keep returning in new forms as long as a person keeps growing, which means this work of noticing is never finished. And at first, that can sound exhausting, but sit with it a little longer, and it becomes something closer to a relief, because it means love, real love, the kind that survives the fading of the first glow, is not a lucky accident you either land or miss. It is something built, deliberately, out of this ongoing return, two people slowly learning to see each other, without the old images standing in the way, learning to be moved by the actual person in front of them, rather than the shape that person was first mistaken for. Think again of that same couple a year later. The 10 minutes late no longer trigger panic, not because he has changed his habits, but because she has learned to recognize the old window and the old waiting the moment they rise in her, and can set them down before they land on him. This does not kill the wonder between them. It changes what the wonder is made of. Early wonder is borrowed light. It comes from the image, and it flares easily, and fades easily, because it was never really about the actual person. Later wonder, the kind earned through this slow return of projection, comes from seeing an actual, limited, particular human being, with complete clarity, tired sometimes, ordinary sometimes, wrong sometimes, and still choosing them. That is a rarer and steadier kind of love than the first spark ever offered, and it asks something of you that infatuation never asked. Patience with an ordinary face, patience with your own history, and the willingness to keep asking, not once, but as a practice, what am I placing on this person tonight that actually belongs to me? This is available to anyone, not because it is easy, but because it is small enough to do on any given evening, on any given Tuesday, at any kitchen table, where a feeling arrives larger than the moment that caused it. So here is the decree for this final key. I will take back what is mine, and love what is actually there. Say it once, and once again. I will take back what is mine, and love what is actually there. Here is the whole picture. The face that moves you carries an old inner image. The image is searching for a very specific resonance. The same pattern repeats until it is finally seen. The glow you feel first is borrowed light that must fade to let real seeing begin. Your outsized reactions are old wounds speaking through small moments. And the practice of taking the projection back is what turns first attraction into a love that can actually hold another person. None of this makes love smaller, it makes it honest. And an honest love, Jung would say, is the only kind sturdy enough to last past the first bright weeks. The person you love is showing you who you are, so look closely, and then, having looked, face it.